हेलो। अहिले मैले पढिरहेको बुकमा चाहिँ के भइरहेछ भन्दाखेरि पहिला चाहिँ भेनस चाहिँ हाम्रो अर्थको एटमोस्फियरमा आएको थियो होइन, अनि अर्थसँग एकदमै नजिक आएको थियो। अनि ग्राभिटेसनले गर्दाखेरि हाम्रो अर्थको रोटेसन चाहिँ रोकिएको थियो होइन। अनि त्यसले गर्दा चाहिँ सन चाहिँ एउटै ठाउँमा बसेको बसै अनि अर्को पार्ट अफ द वर्ल्डमा चाहिँ रातिको राति भएको थियो होइन। अनि यो चाहिँ सबै हाम्रो यो मिथोलोजी यो रिलिजनको स्टोरीहरूमा एकदमै सिम्बोलिक फर्ममा रेकर्डेड भएको छ र रेकर्ड गरेको छ। र यो अहिले मैले पढेको किताबमा चाहिँ त्यो रिलिजन र स्टोरीहरू सबै कुरा साइन्टिफिक वेमा एनालाइज गरेको छ होइन। अनि यो चाहिँ अब इट्स अ बिग स्टोरी र म त्यही पढ्दैछु। र अहिलेको च्याप्टर चाहिँ द डार्कनेस। र यहाँनिर के पनि भन्छ भन्दाखेरि हाम्रो पेट्रोलियमहरू चाहिँ सब यो भेनसको त्यो भेनस चाहिँ एउटा कमेट जसरी आउँछ र त्यसको टेल चाहिँ कार्बन र हाइड्रोजनले बनेको हुन्छ। र जब त्यो अक्सिजनसँग मिक्स हुन्छ र सबै त्यो आगो लाग्न थाल्छ होइन, अनि त्यो एटमोस्फियरमा एकछिन अक्सिजनको कमी भएपछि चाहिँ त्यो कार्बन र हाइड्रोजन चाहिँ लिक्विड फर्ममा बनेर अनि सबै तल झर्छ अनि डेजर्टहरूमा बस्छ। र त्यो जहाँ त्यो पेट्रोलियम झर्छ त्यो ठाउँको रिलिजियस टेक्स्टमा चाहिँ सबै यो कुराहरू लेखेको छ। र त्यो ठाउँ चाहिँ मेक्सिको यो एस्टेक्स कल्चरहरूमा छ, साइबेरियाको हिस्ट्रीमा छ, अनि इजिप्ट अरब त्यस्तो त्यस्तो ठाउँहरूमा छ। र म पढ्दै जान्छु भन्दै जान्छु। The darkness. The earth entered deeper into the tail of onrushing comet and approached its body. This approach, if one is to believe the sources, was followed by a disturbance in the rotation of the earth. Terrific hurricanes swept the earth because of the change of reversal of the angular velocity of rotation, and because of the sweeping gas, dust and cinders of the comet. मेरो इङ्ग्लिस चाहिँ त्यस्तो राम्रो छैन, त्यही भएर there will be lots of mistakes होला है, don't mind. Numerous rabbinical sources describe the calamity of darkness. The material is collected as follows. An exceedingly strong wind endured 7 days. All the time the land was shrouded in darkness. On the 4th, 5th, and the 6th days, the darkness was so dense that the people of Egypt could not stir from their place. The darkness was of such a nature that it could not be dispelled by artificial means. The light of the fire was either extinguished by a violence of storm, or else it was made invisible and swallowed up in the density of the darkness. Nothing could be discerned. None was able to speak or to hear, nor could anyone venture to take food, but they laid themselves down, their outward senses in a trance. Thus they remained overwhelmed by the affliction. The darkness was of such kind that their eyes were blinded by it and their breath choked. It was not of ordinary earthly kind. The rabbinical tradition, contradicting the spirit of the scriptural narrative, states that during the plague of darkness the vast majority of the Israelites perished, and that only a small fraction of the original Israelite population of Egypt was spared to leave Egypt. यो चाहिँ मोजेसको टाइमतिर हो भनेर भन्छ है, किनकि त्यस्तै डकुमेन्टेड छ। यदि तपाईँहरूले मोजेसको पढेछ भने यो चाहिँ ओल्ड टेस्टामेन्टमा छ र मैले पहिल्यै पढेको थिएँ र कति कुरा फ्ल्यासब्याक भइरहेछ। अनि त्यहाँनिर चाहिँ एकदमै ठुलो लामो समयको प्लेगहरूको कुरा गर्छ क्या। अनि दिस इज रिलेटेड टु दिस। 49 out of every 50 Israelites are said to have perished in the plague. A shrine of black granite found at El Aris on the border of Egypt and Palestine bears a long inscription in hieroglyphics. It reads, "The land was in great affliction. Evil fell on the earth. There was a great upheaval in the residence. Nobody could leave the palace. There was no exit from the palace. During 9 days and during these 9 days of upheaval, there was such a tempest that neither men nor gods, the royal family, could see the faces of those beside them. This record employs the same description of the darkness as Exodus 10:12. And there was a thick darkness in all the land of Egypt 3 days. They saw not one another, neither rose any from his place for 3 days. The difference in the number of the days, 3 and 9, of the darkness is reduced in rabbinical sources, where the time is given as 7 days. The difference between 7 and 9 days is negligible if one considers the subjectivity of the time estimation under such condition. भन्नाले अब अँध्यारोको अँध्यारै मात्रै भइरहेछ, अर्थ रोटेटै गरिरहेछ होइन भनेपछि अब कति दिन गयो भनेर त्यो भन्नै सक्दैन. सो देयर इज कोही कोहीले चाहिँ त्यो 9 दिन जति भयो हुन्छ, कोहीले 7 दिन जति भयो हुन्छ र त्यस्तै. Appraisal of the darkness with respect to its impenetrability is also subjective. Rabbinical sources say that for part of the time there was a very slight visibility. For the rest 3 days there was no visibility at all. अनि अर्थ बिस्तारै घुम्न थाल्दैछ है. It should be kept in mind that, as in the case I have already discussed, a day and a night of darkness or light can be described as 1 day or as 2 days. That both sources, the Hebrew and Egyptian, refer to the same event can be established by another means also. यो पेट्रोलियमको चाहिँ मैले पहिलाको भिडियोमा भनेको छु जस्तो लाग्यो होइन. जस के भन्दा हाम्रो पेट्रोलियमहरू चाहिँ सबै फसिलहरूबाट आएको भन्छ होइन. तर यो थ्योरीले चाहिँ जस त्यो भेनसको टेल चाहिँ द्याट वाज द कार्बन एन्ड नाइट्रोजन अनि जुन चाहिँ अक्सिजन छ मिक्स भएपछि बल्छ होइन. र एटमोस्फियरमा बल्यो र जब त्यहाँनिर अक्सिजनको कमी भयो त्यो कार्बन र हाइड्रोजन चाहिँ लिक्विड फर्ममा टर्न भएर अनि सबै यो देशहरूमा यो अहिले जहाँनिर यो उहरू छ नि एकदमै पेट्रोलियम जहाँनिर धेरै छ नि त्यो सबै त्यहाँनिर चरेको थियो क्या. अनि पहिलाको भिडियोमा चाहिँ कस्तो भन्दाखेरि उनीहरूको पुरा जिउभरि पुरै यो ल्यान्डभरि यो पेट्रोलियमहरू आएर उनीहरूलाई चाहिँ त्यो के हो थाहा छैन होइन. कति चाहिँ त्यहीँनिर जलेर पुरा एक्सप्लोडहरू भएर मर्छ, कतिले चाहिँ त्यसलाई पुजार्न खोज्छ र त्यसले नै जलाइदिन्छ होइन. यस्तो भइरहेको थियो. र मेरो योभन्दा अगाडिको एउटा भिडियो चाहिँ डिलिट पनि भयो. कसरी डिलिट भयो भन्दाखेरि मैले रेकर्ड गरेको थिएँ तर लास्टमा खोइ त्यो भिडियो नै नचलिरहेको. अनि एउटा होल च्याप्टर चाहिँ त्यो भिडियोमै गयो होइन. अनि आई डोन्ट वान्ट टु डु इट अगेन. तर म यो भिडियो चाहिँ एकदमै लामो गर्छु. मेबी दिस विल बी द लास्ट आई विल रिड द बुक. अनि अर्को भिडियो चाहिँ आई विल डु समथिङ एल्स. Following the prolonged darkness and the hurricane, the pharaoh, according to the hieroglyphic text of the shrine, persuaded the evildoers to the place called Pikiroti. The same place is mentioned in Exodus 14:9. But the Egyptian persuaded after them all the horses and chariots of the Pharaoh, and overtook them encamping by the sea beside Pihahirot. The inscription on the shrine also narrates the death of the Pharaoh during his pursuit under exceptional circumstances. Now when the majesty fought with the evildoers in this pool, the place of the real pool, the evildoers prevailed not over his majesty. His majesty leaped into the place of the real pool. This is the same apotheosis described in Exodus 15:19. For the horse of Pharaoh went in with his chariots and with his horsemen into the sea, and the Lord brought again the waters of the sea upon them. This यतिखेर चाहिँ इजिप्ट र इजरायलिटिजहरु चाहिँ लाइक इजिप्शियन फेरो वाज ट्राइङ टु किल द इजरायलिटिज अनि इजिप्शियनहरुको अकाउन्टमा चाहिँ फेरो इज द किङ भनेर भनेको छ अनि यो इजरायलिटिजहरुको अकाउन्टमा चाहिँ फेरो इज अ ब्याड गाई अनि यो छुट्टै छुट्टै डिफ्रेन्ट इन्स्क्रिप्सनहरु डिफ्रेन्ट अकाउन्टहरु तर बोथ आर टेलिङ द सेम स्टोरी द्याट फेरो चाहिँ आउँदा आउँदै उनलाई चाहिँ यो समुद्रले ऊ चाहिँ यो समुद्रको रियल पुलमा खस्यो टाइपको उसलाई चाहिँ जस्ट एउटा नेचुरल फेनोमिननले लग्यो जस्तो कुरा गर्छ. इफ द इजिप्शियन डार्कनेस वाज caused by the earth's status or tilting of its axis and was aggravated by a thin cinder dust from the comet, then the entire globe must have suffered from the effect of these two concurring phenomena. In either the eastern or the western parts of the world, there must have been a very extended gloomy day. Nations and tribes in many places of the globe, to the south, to the north, and to the west of the Egypt, have old traditions about a cosmic catastrophe during which the sun did not shine, but in some parts of the world the traditions maintain that sun did not set for a period of time equal to a few days. Tribes of the Sudan of the south of the Egypt refer in their tales to a time when the night would not come to an end. Kalevala, the epos of the Finns, tells of a time when hailstones of iron fell from the sky and the sun and the moon disappeared, were stolen from the sky and did not appear again. In their stead, after a period of darkness, a new sun and a new moon were placed in the sky. यो हाम्रो एभ्री मिथोलोजीमा चाहिँ कस्तो छ भन्दाखेरि के भन्छ एभ्री मिथोलोजीले चाहिँ के भन्छ भन्दाखेरि देयर हेज बिन 7 एजेस भन्छ हैन अनि त्यो 7 एजेसमा चाहिँ 7 वटा डिफ्रेन्ट सन भन्छ क्या अनि एभ्री एजेस चाहिँ त्योभन्दा अगाडि चाहिँ एउटा बिग क्याटास्ट्रोफी बिग प्रलय पछि एउटा नयाँ एज आएको भन्छ क्या अनि हामी चाहिँ 7th छ अरे क्या अनि त्यो एभ्री प्रलयमा चाहिँ हाम्रो यो इस्ट एन्ड यो सन जहाँबाट राइज हुन्छ नि त्यसको डिरेक्सन चाहिँ चेन्ज भएको छ अरे क्या अहिले चाहिँ हाम्रो इस्टबाट राइज हुन्छ हैन तर पहिला इट माइट ह्याभ बिन डिफ्रेन्ट क्या अनि यो सिजनको सिक्वेन्सहरू पनि इट माइट ह्याभ इन अ डिफ्रेन्ट सिक्वेन्स लाइक यो इट्स नट फिक्स्ड भन्छ क्या अनि डे एन्ड यो एक दिनमा अहिले 24 आवर्स कति हुन्छ एक वर्षमा 365 डेज समथिङ आवर्स एन्ड मिनट हुन्छ हैन it's not always like that. It doesn't have to be always like that, रे क्या इट क्यान बी डिफ्रेन्ट तर अहिले चाहिँ त्यस्तो छ अहिलेको यो प्रेजेन्ट एजमा चाहिँ भनेर भन्छ है अनि यो चाहिँ सबै रिलिजन लाइक इस्टदेखि वेस्टदेखि यो नेटिभ अमेरिकन अनि यो मिडल इस्ट युरोपियन यो एसियन चाइनिज जापानिज अनि यो सब कल्चरहरूमा यो अस्ट्रेलियन कल्चरहरूमा या एबोरिजिनल अस्ट्रेलियन कल्चरहरूमा इट्स अ भेरी सिमिलर स्टोरी अनि त्यहीँबाट आउँछ हाम्रो यो रिलिजनहरू अहिलेको but the story is the same. Caius Julius Solinus writes that following the deluge which is reported to have occurred in the days of Augeas, a heavy night spread over the globe. Augeas, in the manuscripts of Avila and Molina, who collected the traditions of the Indians of the New World, it is related that the sun did not appear for 5 days, a cosmic collision of stars preceding the cataclysm. बस्नै गाह्रो भयो म मिलाउँछु ल A cosmic collision of stars preceded the cataclysm. People and animals tried to escape to mountain caves. Scarcely had they reached there when the sea, breaking out of bounds following a terrifying shock, began to rise on the Pacific coast. But as the sea rose, filling the valleys and the plains around, the mountain of Ancasmarca rose, too like a ship on the waves. समुद्रबाट चाहिँ एउटा माउन्टेन रोज भएछ त्यतिखेर सबै प्रलय हुँदाखेरि. During the 5 days that this cataclysm lasted, the sun did not show its face and the earth remained in darkness. यो चाहिँ उता नेटिभ अमेरिकनहरूको स्टोरी हो है, यस्तो भएर त्यहाँ चाहिँ डार्कनेस भएर रहेछ. अनि यता मिडल इस्टमा चाहिँ घामको घाम लागिरहेको रहेछ. Thus the traditions of the Peruvians describe a time when the sun did not appear for 5 days. In the upheaval, the earth changed its profile and the sea fell upon the land. East of Egypt in Babylonia, the 11th tablet of the Epic of Gilgamesh refers to the same events. From out the horizon rose a dark cloud and it rushed against the earth. The land was shriveled by the heat of the flames. Desolation stretched to heaven. All that was bright was turned into darkness, nor could a brother distinguish his brother. 6 days the hurricane deluge and tempest continued sweeping the land, and all human back to its clay was returned. योभन्दा पहिला चाहिँ कस्तो भइरहेको थियो भन्दा पहिला चाहिँ के भन्यो भन्दाखेरि जस यो चाहिँ पहिलाको भिडियोमा छ होला. अर्थ चाहिँ घुम्दाखेरि जब ठ्याक्क रोटेसन रोक्यो नि, सबभन्दा सुरुमा चाहिँ यसको कोर रोक्यो होइन, त्यसपछि यसको म्याग्मा रोक्यो, अनि त्यसपछि यसको क्रस्ट रोक्यो क्या मत्तीको, किनकि अर्थको भित्र त लिक्विड छ नि त. अनि त्यस्तो हुँदाखेरि चाहिँ क्रस्ट र म्याग्माको टाइम डिफ्रेन्ट हुनाले चाहिँ त्यहाँनिर एकदमै फ्रिक्सन भएर अनि भोल्क्यानहरू एकदमै धेरै इरप्ट भयो क्या त्यहाँबाट. अनि यो अर्थक्वेकहरू भयो अरे त्यहाँबाट, हुन्छ नि ल्यान्डबाट आगोहरू निस्किने त्यस्तो भयो क्या. त्यो चाहिँ म्याग्मा सुरुमा मोल्टेन म्याग्मा ठ्याक्क रोक्यो होइन, अनि अर्थको क्रस्ट चाहिँ म्याग्मा रोकेपछि अलिकति अझै अगाडि गएर बल्ल रोक्यो अरे क्या. अनि त्यो फ्रिक्सनले गर्दा चाहिँ यो माउन्टेनहरू राइज भयो भन्छ क्या. अनि यो जहाँ चाहिँ पहिला समुद्र थियो त्यो चाहिँ समुद्रको पानीहरू चाहिँ सबै ल्यान्डमा आयो अरे होइन. अनि पहिला जहाँ ल्यान्ड थियो त्यो चाहिँ समुद्र जस्तो भयो अरे, त्यस्तो पनि भयो अरे, कति ठाउँहरू डुबायो अरे. अनि एन्टार्क्टिका र साइबेरिया चाहिँ त्यहाँनिर म्यामथहरू हिँडिरहेको थियो अरे क्या. अनि म्यामथहरूलाई त्यो पछि भेट्टाउँदा पनि होइन, साइबेरियाबाट चाहिँ सबभन्दा धेरै यो म्यामथको टस्कहरू गर्छ क्या, स्मगल गर्छ क्या अहिले पनि. अनि म्यामथहरूलाई भेट्टाउँदा चाहिँ कस्तो स्टेटमा भेटाएको भन्दाखेरि फ्रोजन होइन, फ्रोजन तर साइबेरियामा घाँस खाइरहेको क्या, जुन चाहिँ अहिले त्यहाँ फल्दैन क्या. त्यसको कति 1000 माइल्स पर मात्रै त्यो घाँसहरू अहिले पाउँछ क्या. तर त्यतिखेर चाहिँ त्यो चाहिँ एकदम ग्रिन ल्यान्ड थियो अरे. अनि म्यामथको वरिपरि चाहिँ मान्छेहरू पनि विथ द वेपन होइन म्यामथलाई हन्ट गर्नलाई, त्यो लाइक जस्ताको त्यस्तै भेटेको क्या. म्यामथहरू पनि अब एक्सटिन्ट भएको भए त डिके हुँदै गएको भेट्टाउनु पर्ने हो नि त. तर दे वर लाइक एज फ्रेस एज बिफ, फ्रोजन बिफ त्यस्तो भेट्टाएको अरे क्या. अनि पछि त्यो म्यामथहरू खोज्दाखेरि चाहिँ त्यहाँको त्यो खोज्ने ठाउँमा त्यो कति कुकुरहरू गएर चाहिँ पुरा त्यो म्यामथको मासु खाइरहेको थियो अरे क्या. अनि फ्रेस थियो अरे क्या पुरै, इन द ब्लक अफ आइस हुन्छ नि. अनि के भएको भन्छ भन्दाखेरि त्यो आइस एज चाहिँ यो ग्रेजुअली आएको होइन अरे क्या. यो चाहिँ एकैचोटि आएको अरे क्या. लाइक झट्ट के भयो अनि आइस एज भयो, सबै ठाउँमै आइस भएको. त्यो चाहिँ अर्थको रोटेसनै सिफ्ट भएको भन्छ क्या. अनि त्यो सिफ्ट चाहिँ यो भेनस चाहिँ एज अ कमेट आफ्नो यो म्याथमेटिकल प्रिसिजनमै हुन्छ क्या यो घुम्नेहरू प्लानेटको रोटेसनहरू. तर कहिलेकाहीँ चाहिँ कुनै कमेटहरूको ग्राभिटेसनले चाहिँ त्यसको त्यो ऊ भएर यो प्लानेटको अलिकति रोटेसनमा हल्का त्यो रिभोल्युसनमा हल्का फरक परेर अनि पछि आएर चाहिँ प्लानेटहरू ठोक्किन पनि सक्छ अरे क्या. अनि त्यस्तै एकचोटि भएर चाहिँ भेनस चाहिँ अनि अर्थको एटमोस्फियरमा नजिक आएर अनि प्लानेटहरू चाहिँ कस्तो हुन्छ भन्दा इलेक्ट्रिकली चार्ज हुन्छ क्या. दुइटा प्लानेटलाई नजिक लिएर आएन एकअर्कालाई इलेक्ट्रिसिटीले हान्न थाल्छ क्या. अनि त्यस्तै हुँदाखेरि अनि त्यो थन्डर बोल्टहरू आउँछ. अनि यो जिउसको थन्डर बोल्टहरू चाहिँ त्यसलाई सिग्निफाई गर्छ. इन्द्रको थन्डर बोल्ट त्यसलाई सिग्निफाई गर्छ. अनि प्लाज्मा चाहिँ त्रिशूलको सेपमा हुन्छ क्या. त्यही भएर प्लाज्मा एकदमै अब सेक्रेट भन्छ होइन. आकाशमा चाहिँ पुरा त्यो त्रिशूलहरू जस्तो देखिरहेको थियो क्या. प्लाज्मा चाहिँ बजेर त्रिशूलहरू जस्तो देख्छ क्या ल्याबमा टेस्ट गर्यो भने पनि. अनि करेन्टहरू हानिरहेको थियो होइन. अनि अब चाइना मेक्सिकोतिर चाहिँ त्यो करेन्टलाई अब साँपहरू लाइक सर्पो लाइक फ्लाइङ ड्रागनहरू जस्तो देखेर ड्रागन अफ एपोकालिप्स द सर्पेन्ट अफ एपोकालिप्स त्यस्तो त्यस्तो भन्छ क्या. जस्ट लाइक होल स्काईभरि नै देयर वर लाइक थन्डर बोल्ट्स अनि त्यस्तो त्यस्तो कुराहरू एकछिनमा भन्दै जान्छ है. In the upheaval, the earth changed its profile and the sea fell upon the land. East of Egypt is Babylonia. यो मैले पढिसकेँ. The Iranian book Anugita reveals that a threefold day and threefold night concluded a world age. And the book Bundahis in a context that I shall quote later, and that shows a close relation to the events of the cataclysm I describe here, tells of the world being dark at midday as though it were in deepest night. It was caused, according to the Bundahis, by a war between the stars and the planets. A protracted night, deepened by the onrushing dust sweeping in from interplanetary space, enveloped Europe, Africa, and America, the valleys of the Euphrates and the Indus also. If the earth did not stop rotating but slowed down or was tilted, there must have been a longitude where a prolonged day was followed by a prolonged night. Iran is so situated that, if one is to believe that Iranian tradition, the sun was absent for a threefold day, and then it's sown for a threefold day. इरान चाहिँ त्यस्तो ठाउँमा पर्छ होइन. अनि त्यहाँको एन्सियन्ट टेक्स्टमा चाहिँ यो वर्ल्ड एज सुरु हुनुभन्दा अगाडि चाहिँ एउटा ठाउँमा चाहिँ के अरे एकचोटि चाहिँ 3 दिनसम्म घाम लाग्यो अनि अर्को चाहिँ 3 दिनसम्म अँध्यारो भएको भए पहिला चाहिँ अँध्यारो भयो अरे अनि चाहिँ घाम लाग्यो अरे. Further to the east, there must have been a protracted day corresponding to the protracted night in the west. According to Bahman Yast, at the end of the world age in eastern Iran or in India, the sun remained 10 days visible in the sky. In China, during the reign of the Emperor Yahoo, a great catastrophe brought a world age to a close. For 10 days the sun did not set. The events of the time of the Emperor Yahuwah deserve close examination. I shall return to the subject very shortly. Argo chapter, Earthquake. The earth, forced out of its regular motion, reacted to the close approach of the body of the comet. A major shock convulsed the lithosphere, and the area of the earthquake was the entire globe. If who were witnessed and survived this earthquake, the towns are destroyed. Upper Egypt has become west. All is ruined. There's a Ipuerle भनेको is somebody from Egypt. The residence is overturned in a minute. Only an earthquake could have overturned the residence in a minute. The Egyptian word for to overturn is used in the sense of to overthrow a wall. This was the 10th plague, and Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. Exodus 12:30. Houses fell, smitten by one violent blow. The angel of the Lord passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt, when he smote the Egyptians and delivered our houses. Exodus 12:27. Nogaf, meaning smote, is the word used for a violent blow, a very violent blow, as for instance, goring by the horns of an axe. The Passover Haggadah says, the firstborn of the Egyptians didst thou cross at midnight. Damn. The reason why the Israelites were more fortunate in this plague than the Egyptians probably lies in the kind of material of which their dwellings were constructed. Occupying a marshy district and working on clay, the captives must have lived in huts made of clay and reeds, which are more resilient than brick or stone. The Lord will pass over the door and will not suffer the destroyer to come and smite your houses. Smite, okay, smite. My English is very bad. An example of the selective action of a natural agent upon the various kinds of construction is narrated also in Mexican annals. During a catastrophe accompanied by hurricane and earthquake, only the people who lived in small log cabins remained uninjured. The larger buildings were swept away. They found that those who lived in small houses had escaped, as well as the newly married couples, whose custom it was to live for a few years in cabins in front of those of their fathers-in-law. In Ages of Chaos, you see, यो राइटरको अर्को बुक हो होइन. In Ages of Chaos, my reconstruction of ancient history, I shall show that firstborn Bakhor in the text of the plague is a corruption of chosen Batsor. मलाई pronounce गर्न होइन. All the flower of Egypt succumbed in the catastrophe. Succumbed नै हो. Forsooth, the children of princes are dashed against the walls. The children of princes are cast out in the streets. The prison is ruined, wrote Epiwer, and this reminds us of princes in palaces and captives in dungeons who were victims in the disaster. Exodus 12:29. To confirm my interpretation of the 10th plague as an earthquake, which should be obvious from the expression to smite the houses, I find a corroborating passage of Artapanus in which he describes the last night before the Exodus, and which is quoted by Eusebius. There was hail and earthquake by night, so that those who fled from the earthquake were killed by the hail, and those who sought shelter from the hail were destroyed by earthquake. And at that time all the houses fell in, and most of the temples. भर्खर कोही आएर थिएँ मैले यस्तो हेरेको, तर को थियो मैले देखिनँ, हेर्नै नपाएर. Also, Hieronymus Saint Jerome wrote in an epistle that in the night in which Exodus took place, all the temples of Egypt were destroyed either by an earthquake or by the thunderbolt. Similarly, in the Midrashim, the 7th plague, the plague of the Barad meteorites, earthquake, fire, meteorites. It is also said that the structures which were erected by the Israelite slaves in Pithom and Ramses collapsed or were swallowed by the earth. An inscription which dates from the beginning of the New Kingdom refers to a temple of the Middle Kingdom that was swallowed by the ground at the close of the Middle Kingdom. The head of the celestial body approached very close, breaking through the darkness of the gaseous envelope, and, according to the Midrashim, the last night in Egypt was as bright as the noon on the day of the summer solstice. What is the meaning of solstice? मलाई चाहिँ थाहा छैन हैन, तर मैले यो वर्ड चाहिँ कति देखेको छु, के होला. The population fled, men flee. Tents are what they make like the dwellers of hills, wrote Epiwer. The population of a city destroyed by an earthquake usually spends the nights in the fields. The book of Exodus describes a horrid flight from Egypt on the night of the 10th plague. A mixed multitude of non-Israelites left Egypt together with the Israelites, who spent their first night in the Sukkot huts. The lightnings lightened the world. The earth trembled and shook. Thou leddest thy people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. They were brought out of Egypt by a portent which looked like a stretched arm, by a stretched out arm, and by great terrors, or with a mighty hand, and with an outstretched arm, and with great terribleness, and with signs, and with wonders. At midnight all the houses of Egypt were smitten. There was not a house where there was not one dead. This happened on the night of the 14th of the month Aviv, Exodus 12:6, 13:4. This is the night of the Passover. It appears that the Israelites originally celebrated Passover on the eve of the 14th of Aviv. The month Aviv is called the first month, Exodus 12:18. Thoth was the name of the first month of the Egyptians. What for Israelites became a feast became a day of sadness and fasting for the Egyptians. किनकि इजराइलाइट्सहरु चाहिँ आफ्नो फ्रीडममा गएर थियो नि त, इजिप्सियनहरुको स्लेभरीबाट, अनि इजिप्टहरु चाहिँ डिस्ट्रोय भएर थियो नि त. अनि यो चाहिँ के भन्छ भन्दाखेरि हैन, जब त्यो भेनस आयो नि, हाम्रो यो ओसनहरु चाहिँ 36 माइल्ससम्म उडे भएको थियो क्या, लाइक अ कन्क्रिट वाल क्या. कति महिनासम्म आकाशमै उडेको थियो क्या हैन. अनि त्यो बिचको यो वाल्स अफ ओसनको प्यासेजबाट चाहिँ मोजेस र इजरायलाइट्सहरु चाहिँ पास गरेको भन्छ क्या. अनि त्यही भएर चाहिँ इजरायलाइट्सहरुले चाहिँ आफूलाई किन चोजन वान हो भन्छ रे भन्दाखेरि, लाइक यो बुक अनुसार, बिकज जब यो सबै कस्मिक क्याटास्ट्रोफीमा उनीहरूलाई चाहिँ फ्रिडम पायो हैन, उनीहरूले चाहिँ आफू फ्री भएर जान पायो, र जब उनीहरूलाई स्लेभ बनाउने इजिप्सियन्सहरु चाहिँ सबै डिस्ट्रोय भयो हैन उनीहरुकै आँखा अगाडि, र त्यही भएर उनीहरूले चाहिँ आफूलाई वी आर द चोजन वान बाइ द गड भनेर पनि भन्छ रे क्या, यो बुक अनुसार अनि यो हिस्ट्री अनुसार. The 13th day of the month Thoth is a very bad day भनेर भन्छ, किनकि 13th day of the month Thoth भनेको चाहिँ यो प्लेगको 13th डेमा चाहिँ उनीहरू गएको हो क्या. अनि 13th डेमै चाहिँ इजिप्सियनहरुको यो फेरोहरु चाहिँ मर्यो क्या हैन. अनि यो 13 days अनलकी डे भन्ने चाहिँ इजिप्सियन उबाट आएको रे क्या, इजिप्सियन ट्रेडिसनबाट, अनि which is related to this. Thou shalt not do anything on this day. It is the day of the combat which Horus waged war with Seth. It is the day of the combat which Horus waged with Seth. The Hebrews counted and still count the beginning of the day from sunset. Mhm. The Egyptians reckoned from sunrise. As the catastrophe took place at midnight, for the Israelites it was the 14th day of the first month. For the Egyptians it was the 13th day. An earthquake caused by contact or collision with a comet must be felt simultaneously all around the world. An earthquake is a phenomenon that occurs from time to time, but an earthquake accompanying an impact in the cosmos would stand out and be recalled as a memorable date by survivors. In the calendar of the Western Hemisphere, on the 13th day of the month called Olin, motion or earthquake, a new sun is said to have initiated another world age. The Aztecs, like the Egyptians, reckoned the day from sunrise. Here we have, en passant, the answer to the open question concerning the origin of the superstition which regards the number 13, and especially the 13th day, as unlucky and inauspicious. It is still the belief of the many superstitious persons, unchanged through thousands of years and even expressed in the same term. The 13th day is a very bad day. You shall not do anything on this day. I do not think that any record on this belief can be found dating from before the time of Exodus. The Israelites did not share the superstition of evil working number 13 or 14. Chapter 3. The Hurricane. The swift shifting of the atmosphere under the impact of the gaseous parts of the comet, the drift of air attracted by the body of the comet, and the rush of the atmosphere resulting from inertia when the earth stopped rotating or shifted its poles, all contributed to produce hurricanes of enormous velocity and force of worldwide dimensions. Manuscript Truano and other documents of the Mayas describe a cosmic catastrophe during which the ocean fell on the continent and a terrible hurricane swept the earth. The hurricane broke up and carried away all towns and the forests. Exploding volcanoes, tides sweeping over mountains, and impetuous winds threatened to annihilate humankind, and actually did annihilate many species of animals. The face of the earth changed, mountains collapsed, other mountains grew and rose over the unrushing cataract of water driven from oceanic spaces. Numberless rivers lost their beds, and a wild tornado moved through the debris descending from the sky. The end of the world age was caused by huracan, the physical agent that brought darkness and swept away houses and trees and even rocks and mounds of earth. From this name is derived hurricane, the word we use for a strong wind. Huracan destroyed the major part of the human race. In the darkness swept by wind, resinous stuff fell from the sky and participated with fire and water in the destruction of the world. For 5 days, save from the burning naphtha is a petroleum in Aramaic, अनि Arabicमा पनि जस्तो लाग्यो Hebrew naphtha भनेको petrol. For 5 days, save the burning naphtha and burning volcanoes. The world was dark since the sun did not appear. The theme of a cosmic hurricane is reiterated time and again in the Hindu Vedas and in the Persian Avesta. And diluvium venti, the deluge of wind, in a term known from many ancient authors. In the section The Darkness, I quoted rabbinical sources of the exceedingly strong west wind that endured for 7 days when the land was enveloped in darkness, and the hieroglyphic inscription from Elaris about 9 days of upheaval when there was such a tempest that nobody could leave the palace or see the face of those beside him, and the 11th tablet of the Epic of Gilgamesh, which says the 6 days and a night the hurricane, deluge, and tempest continued sweeping the land. And mankind perished almost altogether in the battle of the planet god Marduk with Tiamat. Marduk created the evil wind and the tempest and the hurricane and the fourfold wind and the sevenfold wind and the real wind and the wind which had no equal. The Maoris narrate that amid a stupendous catastrophe, the mighty winds, the fierce squalls, the clouds, dense, dark fury, wildly drifting, wildly bursting, rust on creation in their midst. Tauhiri Mati, father of winds and storms, and swept away giant forests and lashed the waters into billows, whose crest rose high like mountains. The earth groaned terribly and the ocean fled. The earth was submerged in ocean but was drawn by Tifafauno, relate the aborigines of Paumotu in Polynesia. The new isle were baited by a star. In the month of March, the Polynesians celebrate a god Tafanua. In Arabic, typhoon is real wind and tufan is the deluge. And the same word occurs in Chinese as typhoon. It appears as though the noise of the hurricane was overtoned by a sound unlike the name typhoon. It appears as though the noise of the hurricane was overtoned by a sound not unlike the name typhoon, as if the storm were calling him by name. The cosmic upheaval proceeded with a mighty strong west wind, but before the climax, in the simple words of the scriptures, the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. The Israelites were on the shore of the Sea of Passage at the climax of the cataclysm. The name Jamsuf is generally rendered as Red Sea. The passage is supposed to have taken place either at the Gulf of Suez or at Aqaba Gulf of the Red Sea, but sometimes the site of the passage is identified as one of the inner legs of the route from Suez to the Mediterranean. It is argued that Suf means reed, papyrus reed, and since papyrus reed does not grow in the salt water, Jamsuf must have been a lagoon of fresh water. We will not enter here into a discussion where the sea of the passage was. The inscription on the shrine found in Elaris may provide some indication where the pharaoh was engulfed by the real pool. In any event, The topographical distribution of sea and land did not remain the same as before the cataclysm of the days of the Exodus. But the name of the sea of the passage, Jamsuf, is derived not from reed but from hurricane, Sufa in Hebrew. In Egyptian, the Red Sea is called Sari, which signifies the sea of percussion, mere percussioneous. Or the sea of the stroke of the disaster. The Haggadah of Passover says, "Thou didst sweep the land of Morph and Noph on the Passover." The hurricane that brought to an end the Middle Kingdom in Egypt, the blast of heavenly displeasure in the language of Manetho, swept through every corner of the world in order to distinguish in the traditions of the people this diluvium venti of cosmic dimensions from local disasters, storms, other cosmic disturbances like disappearance of the sun or change of the sky must be found accompanying the hurricane. In the Japanese cosmological myth, the sun goddess hid herself for a long time in a heavenly cave in fear of the storm god. The source of light disappeared, the whole world became dark, and the storm god caused monstrous destruction. Gods made terrible noise that the sun should reappear, and from their tumult the earth quaked. In Japan and in the vast extent of the ocean, hurricanes and earthquakes are not rare occurrences, but they do not disturb the day-night succession, nor is there any resulting permanent change in the sky and its luminaries. The sky was low, relate the Polynesians of Takafo Island, and then the winds and waterspouts and the hurricanes came and carried up the sky to its present height. When a world cycle is destroyed by wind, says the Buddhist text of the world cycles, the wind also turns the ground upside down and throws it into the sky, and areas of 100 leagues in extent, 200, 300, 500 leagues in extent crack and are thrown apart by the force of the wind and do not fall again but are blown to powder in the sky and annihilated. And the wind throws up also in the sky the mountains which encircle the earth. They are ground to powder and destroyed. The cosmic wind blows and destroys 100,000 times 10 million worlds. The tide. The ocean tides are produced by the action of the sun and to a larger extent by that of the moon. A body larger than the moon or one nearer to the earth would act with greater effect. A comet with a head as large as the earth passing sufficient close would raise the waters of the oceans miles high. The slowing down or stasis of the earth in its rotation would cause a tidal recession of water towards the poles, but the celestial body nearby would disturb this poleward recession, drawing the water towards itself. The traditions of many peoples persist that seas were torn apart and their water heaped high and thrown up in the continents. In order to establish that these traditions refer to one and the same events, or at least to an event of the same order, we must keep to this guiding sequence. The great tide followed a disturbance in the motion of the earth. The Chinese annals, which I have mentioned and which I intend to quote more extensively in a subsequent section, say that in the time of Emperor Yahuwah, the sun did not go down for 10 days. The world was in flames, and in their vast extent, the waters overtopped the great heights, threatening the heavens with their floods. The water of the ocean was heaped up and cast upon the continent of Asia. A great tidal wave swept over the mountains and broke in the middle of the Chinese empire. The water was caught in the valleys between the mountains, and the land was flooded for decades. The traditions of the people of Peru tell that for a period of time equal to 5 days and 5 nights, the sun was not in the sky, and then the ocean left the shore and with a terrible din broke over the continent. The entire surface of the earth was changed in this catastrophe. The Choctaw Indians of Oklahoma relate. Choctaw हो कि Choctaw हो तर CHOCTAW. The Choctaw Indians of Oklahoma relate. The earth was plunged in darkness for a long time. Finally, a bright light appeared in the north, but it was mountain-high waves rapidly coming nearer. In these traditions, there are two concurrent elements: a complete darkness that endured a number of days in Asia, prolonged day, and when the light broke through, a mountain-high wave that brought destruction. The Hebrew story of the passage of the sea contains the same elements. There was a prolonged and complete darkness. Exodus 10:12. The day of the darkness was at the Red Sea. When the world plunged out of darkness, the bottom of the sea was uncovered. The waters were driven apart and heaped up like walls in the double tide. The Septuagint, I don't know what's that. The Septuagint translation of the Bible says that the water stood as a wall, and the Quran, referring to this event, says like mountains. In the old rabbinical literature, it is said that the water was suspended as if it were glass, solid and massive. The commentators, Rassi, guided by the grammatical structure of the sentence in the book of Exodus, explained in accordance with Mekhilta, the water of all oceans and seas were divided. The Midrashim contain the following description. The waters were piled up to the height of 1600 miles. Wow. 36 miles hoiner is 1600 miles. And they could be seen by all the nations of the earth. The figure in this sentence intends to say that the heap of water was tremendous. According to the scriptures, the waters climbed the mountains and stood above them as they mounted to the heavens. A sea rent apart was a marvelous spectacle and could not have been forgotten. It is mentioned in numerous passages in the scriptures. The pillars of heaven trembled. He divided the sea with his power. Marvelous things did he in the sight of their fathers. He divided the sea and caused them to pass through, and he made the waters to stand as a heap. He gathered the waters of the sea together as a heap. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. Or maybe he भनेको Lord God भनेको पनि हुन सक्छ, इजरायलाइटहरुको God, the chosen one को God, Ray, supposedly. Then the great sea, the Mediterranean, broke into the Red Sea in an enormous tidal wave. ए म रेसिस्ट चाहिँ होइन है तर आइम जस्ट यु नो जसमा जोक चाहिँ हानिदिन्छु जोक हो कि होइन तर जस द चोजन वान रे टाइप्सको कुराहरू whatever. It was an unusual event, and because it was unusual, it became the most impressive recollection in the very long history of these people. All peoples and nations were blasted by the same fire and shattered in the same fury. The tribes of Israel on the shore of a sea found in this annihilation their salvation from bondage. They escaped destruction, but their oppressor perished before their eyes. They extolled the Creator, took upon themselves the burden of moral rules, and considered themselves chosen for a great destiny. When the Spaniards conquered Yucatan, Indians first in their ancient literature related to the conquerors the tradition handed down to them by their ancestors. Their forefathers were delivered from pursuit by some other people when the Lord opened for them a way in the midst of the sea. जस भनेको उता साउथ अमेरिकातिर चाहिँ दे गट द यो जब यो ल्यान्डहरू यो जब सीहरू सबै माथि उड्यो नि होइन अनि एउटा सीको वाल बन्यो नि दुइटा अनि बिचबाट चाहिँ जाने बाटो थियो नि त त्यहाँबाट चाहिँ उनीहरूले चाहिँ सम अदर पिपल केम फ्रम देयर टाइपको कुरा गर्छ क्या मोस्टली लाइक मोजेसको पिपलहरू हुनसक्छ साउथ अमेरिकामा यो चाहिँ This tradition is similar to the Jewish tradition of the passage that some of the Farriers who came to America believed that the Indians of America were of Jewish origin. Most probably यसमा अब Jewish भनेको कालेहरू हुन सक्छ है We don't know just तर अफ्रिकामा चाहिँ अब King Moses, he was a black man. King David, he was a black man. King Solomon, he was a black man पनि भन्छ होइन अनि South America को Indiansहरू there are black people पनि like there are like lots of black people who are Native Americans. Farrier Diego de Landa wrote, some old men of Yucatan say that they have heard from their ancestors that this country was peopled by a certain race who come from the east, whom God delivered by opening for them 12 roads through the sea. If this is true, all the inhabitants of the Indies must be of Jewish descent. भनेपछि जस के हो भन्दाखेरि अब इन्डिज भनेको चाहिँ यो जमैकाहरू हो क्या जमैकामा अब कालेहरू कति बस्छ नि त त्यस्तै ठाउँहरूमा इन्डिजहरूमा अनि उनीहरूले अब राष्ट्रफारीहरूले के भन्छ भन्दाखेरि वी आर जुइस पिपल भन्छ क्या वी आर द जुइस भन्छ द मोजेस वाज आवर लर्ड टाइपको कुरा नि गर्छ आई डोन्ट नो दिस इज भेरी कम्प्लेक्स किनकि हिस्ट्री के भइसक्यो होइन but still it's interesting. It may have been an echo of what happened to the Sea of Passage or a description of a similar occurrence at the same time but in an another place. त्यस्तै अब लाइक कल्चरल असिमिलेसन गर्न मिल्छ नि त जस्तै अब ब्राह्मण हिन्दूहरूले रामायण हाम्रो भन्ने टाइपको होइन अब अहिले हामी जसलाई जीव भन्छ उनीहरूले चाहिँ हामी हो वी आर द chosen one भन्ने टाइपको तर अर्कै हुन सक्छ मेबी द ओरिजिनल जिउज जो चाहिँ लाइक मोजेस लगेको छ दे माइट बी अ ब्ल्याक पिपल दे माइट बी ब्ल्याक पिपल हुन सक्छ According to the Lapland cosmogonic story, when the wickedness increased among the human beings, the midmost of the earth trembled with terror so that the upper layers of the earth fell away, and many of the people were hurled down into those caves in places to perish, and Jobmel, the heaven lord himself, came down. His terrible anger flashed like red, blue, and green fire serpents, and people hid their faces, and the children screamed with fear. The angry god spoke, I shall reverse the world. I shall bid the rivers flow upward. I shall cause the sea to gather itself up into a huge towering wall, which I shall hurl upon your wicked earth, children, and thus destroy them and all life. अब यो पोइम चाहिँ होइन जम्बेल सेट अ स्टर्म विन्ड ब्लोइङ जम्बेल भने चाहिँ द लर्ड उनीहरूको यो चाहिँ कसको कल्चर हो भन्दाखेरि खै बुझ्नै सकिनँ मैले तर कोही हो जे जम्बेल सेट अ स्टर्म विन्ड ब्लोइङ and the wild air spirits raising, foaming, dashing, rising sky high, came the sea wall, crossing all things. Jumble, with one strong upheaval, made the earth lands all turn over, then the world again be righted. Now the mountains and the highlands could no more be seen by Beiski, sun. Filled with groans of dying people, was the fair earth home to mankind? Was the fair earth home of mankind? It's not question mark. No more Beiski sown in heaven. यो चाहिँ ल्यापल्यान्डको रहेछ ल्यापल्यान्ड भन्ने कहाँ मलाई थाहा छैन According to Lapland epic, the world was overwhelmed by the hurricane and the sea, and almost all human beings perished. After the seawall fell on the continent, gigantic waves continued to roll and dead bodies were dashed about in dark waters. This is the apocalypse. The great earthquake and the schism. The great earthquake and the chasms that opened in the ground, the appearance of a celestial body with serpent-like flashes, rivers flowing upward, a seawall that crushed everything, mountains that became leveled or covered with water, the world that was turned over and then righted, the sun that no more shone in the sky. All these are motifs which we found in the description of the calamities of the time of the Exodus. Well, in many places of the world, and especially in the north, large boulders are found in a position which proves that a great force must have lifted them up and carried them long distance before depositing them where they are found today. Sometimes these large loose rocks are of entirely different minerals compositions than the local rocks, but are akin to formations many miles away. Thus, occasionally, an erratic boulder of granite perches on the top of the high ridge of dolerite, whereas the nearest outcrops of granite lie far away. These erratic boulders may weigh as much as 10,000 tons, about as much as 130,000 people. यो चाहिँ के भनिरहेको मैले त्यस्तो बुझेन हैन but still, to explain these facts, the scholars of the first half of the 19th century assumed that enormous tides had swept over the continents and carried with them masses of stone. The transfer of the rocks was explained by the tides, but what could have caused those billows to rise high over the continents? It was conceived that somehow and somewhere in the far north, a series of gigantic waves was mysteriously propagated. These waves were supposed to have precipitated themselves upon the land and then swept madly on over mountain and valley alike, carrying along with them a mighty burden of rocks and stones and rubbish. Such deluges were styled waves of translation, and the till was believed to represent the materials which they hurried along with them in their wild course around the country. The stones and boulders on the hilltops and the mounds of sand and gravel in the lowlands were explained by this theory. Critics, however, maintained that it was unfortunate for this view that it violated at very outset the first principles of science by assuming the former existence of a cause which there was little in nature to warrant. Spasmodic rushes of the sea across a whole country had fortunately never been experienced within the memory of man. That the correctness of the last sentence is questionable is shown by references to the traditions of the numbers of people. Wherever possible, the movement of stones was attributed to the progress of the ice sheet in the glacial ages and to glaciers on the mountain slopes. Agassiz in 1840 assumed that just as the alpine moraines were left behind by the retreating glacier, so the moraines in the flatlands of northern Europe and America could have been caused by the movement of great continental ice sheets, and thus introduced the theory of ice ages. Although this is correct to some extent, the analogy is not exact, as the glaciers of the Alps push the stone down, not up the slope, meeting an upward motion of the ice. Large boulders would probably sink into the ice. The problem of the migration of the stones must be regarded as only partially connected with the progress of the retreat of the ice sheet, if at all. Billows miles high traveled over the land, originating in the causes described in these books. In this book, के भन्छ भन्दाखेरि जस कहाँ कहाँको ढुङ्गाहरू उडेर चाहिँ कहाँ कहाँ पुगेर क्या होइन. अनि अब यो आइसिसको कुरा चाहिँ अब मैले पहिला त्यो योभन्दा अगाडिको भिडियोमा पनि गरेको छु, तर यो चाहिँ अब आइसिस चाहिँ यसरी सुरु भयो कि भनेर भन्ने पनि छ अरे, तर द एभिडेन्स इज नट क्वाइट राइट. It can be established by the extent of denunciation of the rocks under the erratic boulders that the later were deposited at their places during human history. So, for instance, in Wales and Yorkshire, where this effect was evaluated in terms of time, the amount of denunciation of limestone rocks on which the boulders lie is proof that a period of no more than 60,000 years has elapsed since the boulders were left in their positions. The fact that accumulations of stones were transferred from the equator toward the higher latitudes, an enigmatic problem in the ice theory, can be explained by the poleward recession of the equatorial waters at the moment of the velocity of rotation of the earth was reduced or its poles was shifted. The fact in the northern hemisphere in India, the moraines were carried from the equator not only toward higher latitude but also toward the Himalaya mountains, and in the southern hemisphere from the equatorial regions of Africa toward the higher latitude, across the prairies and deserts and forests of the Black Continent. The battle in the sky. At the same time that the seas were heaped up in immense tides, a pageant went on in the sky which presented itself to the horrified onlookers on earth as a gigantic battle. Because this battle was seen from almost all parts of the world, and because it impressed itself very strongly upon the imagination of the peoples, it can be reconstructed in some details. When the earth passed through the gases, dust, and meteorites of the tail, of the comet distributed in rotation, it proceeded on a distorted orbit. Emerging from the darkness, the eastern hemisphere faced the head of the comet. This head only shortly before had passed close to the sun and was in a state of Candescence. Candescence. The night the great earthquake shook the globe was, according to rabbinical literature, as brightly as the day of the summer solstice. Because of the proximity of the earth, the comet left its own orbit and for a while followed the orbit of the earth. The great ball of the comet retreated, then again approached the earth, shrouded in a dark column of gases which looked like a pillar of smoke during the day and a fire at night, and the earth once more passed through the atmosphere of the comet, this time at its neck. This stage was accompanied by violent and incessant electrical discharges between the atmosphere of the tail and the terrestrial atmosphere. There was an interval of about 6 days between these two close approaches. Emerging from the gases of the comet, the Earth seems to have changed the direction of its rotation, and the pillar of smoke moved to the opposite horizon. त्यस्तो भएछ जस्तै कमेट आउँदाखेरि अर्थको रोटेसन चाहिँ चेन्ज भएर अनि यसको एक्सिस पनि चेन्ज भएर पहिला चाहिँ एउटा ठाउँमा त्यो कमेट थियो भने अहिले चाहिँ फेरि अर्को ठाउँमा त्यो कमेट अपियर हुन गएछ. The column looked like a gigantic moving serpent. When the tidal waves rose to their highest point and the seas were torn apart, a tremendous spark flew between the earth and the globe of the comet, which instantly pushed down the miles-high billows. Meanwhile, the tail of the comet and its head, having become entangled with each other by their close contact with the earth, exchanged violent discharges of electricity. It looked like a battle between the brilliant globe and the dark column of smoke. In the exchange of electrical potentials, the tail and the head were attracted to the other and repelled one from the other. From the serpent-like tail, extensions grew and it lost the form of a column. It looked now like a furious animal with legs and with many heads. The discharges tore the column to pieces, a process that was accompanied by a rain of meteorites upon the earth. पहिला चाहिँ प्लाज्मा त्यो इलेक्ट्रिकल डिस्चार्जहरू देखेछ अनि पछि त्यो यो डिस्चार्जले गर्दा त्यसको के भएर अनि त्यो इलेक्ट्रिसिटीहरू चाहिँ एनिमलहरू पुरा मोन्स्टर यो टाउकै टाउको भएको स्नेकहरू जस्तो देखेछ होइन. अनि त्यो इलेक्ट्रिक डिस्चार्ज हुँदा भेनसबाट चाहिँ त्यो मेटियोराइडहरू डाङडुङ पड्केर झरेछ होइन. अनि सबै त्यो अर्थमा झर्छ क्या. अनि इट लुक्स लाइक त्यो इलेक्ट्रिसिटी आउँछ अनि त्यो पुरा स्नेकको टाउकोहरू जस्तो देख्छ. अनि त्यसपछि चाहिँ त्यो मेटियोराइडहरू झरेको चाहिँ त्यो स्नेक चाहिँ पुरा पिसेसमा टर्न भएको जस्तो देख्छ क्या. It appears as though the monster were defeated by the brilliant globe and buried in the sea, or wherever the meteorites fell. The gases of the tail subsequently enveloped the earth. The globe of the comet, which lost a large portion of its atmosphere as well as much of its electrical potential, withdrew from the earth but did not break away from its attraction. Apparently, after a 6-week interval, the distance between the Earth and the globe of the comet again diminished. The new approach of the globe could not be readily observed because the Earth was shrouded in the clouds of dust left by the comet of its former approach, as well as by dust ejected by the volcanoes. After renewed discharges, the comet and the Earth parted. This behavior of the comet is of great importance in problems of celestial mechanics, that a comet encountering a planet can become entangled and drawn away from its own path, forced into a new course, and finally liberated from the influence of the planet is proved by the case of Lexell's comet, which in 1767 was captured by Jupiter and its moons. Not until 1779 did it free itself from this entanglement. A phenomenon that has not been observed in modern times is an electrical discharge between a planet and a comet, and also between the head of a comet and its trailing part. The events in the sky were viewed by the peoples of the world as a fight between an evil monster in the form of a serpent and the light god who engaged the monster in battle and thus saved the world. The tail of the comet leaped back and forth under the discharges of the flaming globe was regarded as a serpent body. Was regarded as a separate body. Was regarded as a separate body, inimical to the globe of the comet. Please forgive my English and my reading. And I'm not a very good English speaker, and I'm not a very good reader also. But it's still interesting भइरहेछ. A full survey of the religious and folklore motifs which mirror this event would require more space than is at my disposal here. It is difficult to find a people or tribe on earth that does not have the same motive at the very focus of its religious beliefs. भन्नाले हाम्रो पुरै सारा संसारकै रिलिजियस, सारा संसारकै सबै ट्राइब अनि सबै ठाउँहरूको रिलिजियनमा चाहिँ सेम मोटिभ नहुन चाहिँ एकदमै अनकमन छ अरे क्या. सबैको मोटिभ चाहिँ लाइक यहीँनिर यस्तै ठाउँमै आइपुग्छ अरे. Since the descriptions of the battle between Marduk and Tiamat, the dragon, or Isis and Seth, or Vishnu and the serpent, or Krishna and the serpent, or Ormuzd and Arhiman, follow an almost identical pattern, and they have many details in common with the Battle of Zeus and Typhoon. I shall give here Apollodorus' description of this battle. Typhoon outtopped all the mountains, and his head often burst the stars. One of his hand reached out to the west and the other to the east, and from them projected 100 dragons' heads. From the thighs downward, he had huge coils of vipers which emitted a long hissing. His body was all winged. The fire flashed from his eyes, such as so great was typhoon when hurling kindled rocks. Kindled rocks रहेछ सरी मैले बल्ल त्यो वर्ड प्रनाउन्स गर्न आयो क्या hurling kindled rocks. He made for the very heaven with hissing and shouts, spouting a great jet of fire from his mouth. To the sky of Egypt, Zeus pursued typhoon rushing at heaven. Zeus भन्छ कि जियस भन्छ त्यो ग्रीक गॉड क्या Zeus. Sorry, Zeus. 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 Zeus pelted Typhoon at a distance with thunderbolts, and at close quarters struck him down with an adamantine sickle. And as he fled, pursued him closely as far as Mount Cassius, which overhangs Syria. There, seeing the monster sore wounded, he grappled with him, but Typhoon twined about him and gripped him in his coils. Having recovered his strength, Zeus suddenly from heaven riding in a chariot of winged horses pelted Typhoon with thunderbolts. So being again pursued he, Typhoon, came to Thrace, and in fighting at Mount Hymettus he heaped whole mountains. A stream of blood gushed out of the mountains, and they say that from that circumstances the mountain was called Hymettus, bloody. You Hymettus fool. And when he started to flee through the Sicilian Sea, Zeus cast Mount Etna in Sicily upon him. That is a huge mountain from which down to this day they say that blasts of fire issue from the thunderbolts that were thrown. The struggle left deep marks on the entire ancient world. Some districts were especially associated with the events of this cosmic fight. The Egyptian shore of the Red Sea was called Typhonia. Strabo narrates also that the Arameans or Syrians were terrified witnesses of the battle of Zeus and Typhoon, who they add was a dragon, when struck by the bolts of lightning, fled in search of a descent underground. And not only did he cut furrows into the earth and form the beds of the rivers, but descending underground, he made fountains break forth. यो चाहिँ के भएको भन्दा जब त्यो इलेक्ट्रिकल डिस्चार्जहरू आउँछ नि होइन, अनि त्यसपछि सबै त्यो अर्थमा हान्दाखेरि चाहिँ त्यो डामहरू बस्छ क्या, लाइक त्यो, अनि त्यसले चाहिँ रिभरको बेडहरू बनायो अरे क्या, त्यो इलेक्ट्रिकल डिस्चार्जको डामहरू हुन्छ नि झिझ परेको, त्यस पुरा त्यो रिभर जस्तै हुन्छ नि त, अनि त्यस्तो बनाएर त्यो मात्रै होइन अरे कि उसले पुरा त्यो थन्डरबोल्ट जस्तो उसले चाहिँ फाउन्टेनहरू नै क्रिएट गरेर क्या, त्यस्तो डिपसम्म गएर क्या त्यो इलेक्ट्रिसिटीहरू. Similar descriptions come from the various places of the ancient world in which the nations relate the experience of their ancestors who witnessed the great catastrophe of the middle of the second millennium. I don't know कति हो second millennium भनेको. At the time the Israelites had not yet arrived had a clear monotheistic concept, and, like other peoples, they saw in the great struggle or conflict between good and evil. The author of the book of Exodus, suppressing this conception of the ancient Israelites, presented the portent of fire and smoke moving in a column as an angel or messenger of the Lord. However, many passages in other books of the scriptures preserved this picture as it impressed itself upon eyewitnesses. Rabbah is the Hebrew name for the contester with the Most High. O Lord God of hosts, who is a strong Lord like unto thee? Thou hast broken Rabbah in pieces. The heavens are thine, the earth is also thine. As for the world and the fullness thereof, thou hast founded them, the north and the south, thou hast created them. Deutero Isaiah prayed, Awake, awake, put on strength, O arm of the Lord, awake as in the ancient days, in the generations of old. Art thou not it that hath caught Rabbah and wounded the dragon? Art thou not it which hath dried the sea, the waters of the great deep, that had made the depths of the sea a way for the ransomed to pass over? From these passages, it is clear that the battle of the Lord with Rabbah was not a primeval battle before creation, as some scholars think. Isaiah prophesied for the future. In that day, the Lord with his sore and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. Leviathan भनेपछि के हो थाहा छैन. Leviathan रहेछ. The crooked serpent is shown in many ancient pictures, from China to India to Persia to Assyria to Egypt to Mexico. With the rise of the monotheistic concept, the Israelites regarded this crooked serpent, the contester with the Most High, as the Lord's own creation. He stretched out the north over the empty space, and hangeth the earth upon nothing. The pillars of heaven trembled. He divided the sea with his power. His hand hath formed the crooked serpent. The psalmist also says, God is my king of the old. Thou didst divide the sea by thy strength. Thou breakest the heads of Leviathan in pieces. Thou didst cleave the fountain and the flood. Thou dried up mighty rivers. Hi. The sea was cleft, the earth was cut with furrows, great rivers disappeared, others appeared. The earth rumbled for many years, and the peoples thought that the fiery dragon that had been struck down had descended underground and was groaning there. अब अर्को section, the comet of typhoon. Of all the mysterious phenomena which accompanied the Exodus, this mysterious pillar seemed the first to demand explanation. W. Pythian Adams, The Call of Israel. One of the places of the heavenly combat between elementary forces of nature, as narrated by Apollodorus and Strabo, was on the way from Egypt to Syria. According to Herodotus, the final act of the fight between Jews and Typhon took place at Lake Serbon on the coastal route from Egypt to Palestine. On the way from Egypt to Palestine, the Israelites, after a night of terror and strong east wind, witnessed the upheaval of the day of the passes. Their parallel circumstances led to a conclusion that will sound somewhat strange. Typhon, Typhoeus, lies on the bottom of the sea where the spellbound Israelites saw the upheaval of nature. Darkness, hurricane, mountains of water, fire, and smoke, recorded in the Greek legend as the circumstances in which the battle of Zeus with the dragon Typhon was fought. In the same pit of the sea lie the Pharaoh and his host. Up to now, I have identified Rabba Typhon as a comet, but if Typhon lies on the bottom of the sea, is he not the Pharaoh? This would mean that in the legend of Typhon, two elements were wielded together: the Pharaoh who perished in the catastrophe, and the outrageous rebel against Zeus, the Lord of the Sky. मलाई ZEUS Zeus अझै pronounce गर्न आएन क्या Zeus. Anyways, in Pliny's Natural History, the 91st section of the second book reads, "A terrible comet was seen by the people of Ethiopia and Egypt, to which Typhon, the king of that period, gave his name. It had a fiery appearance and was twisted like a quail, and it was very grim to behold. It was not really a star so much as what might be called a ball of fire." The visit of a disastrous comet, so many times referred to in this book, is told in plain words, not in disguise. However, I must find support for my assumption that the comet of the days of King Typhon was the comet of the days of Exodus. I investigated the writings of the old chronographers, and in Cometographia of Hevelius 1668, I found references to the works of Helvetius, Herlichius, and Rockenbach, all of whom used manuscripts for the most part and not printed sources, as they lived only a little over 1 century after the invention of movable characters and the printing press. Hevelius wrote in Latin, "In the year of the world 2453, 1495 BC, according to the certain authorities, a comet was seen in Syria, Babylonia, India, in the Sinjo, in the form of a disk, at the very time when the Israelites were on their march from Egypt to the promised land." So Rockenbach, the Exodus of the Israelites is placed by Helvetius in the year of the world 2453 or 1495 BC. I was fortunate enough to locate one copy of Rockenbach, De Cometis Tractatus Novus Mythologies, in the United States. To pronounce it मलाई, that must be some sort of Latin word. The book was published in Wittenberg in 1602. Its author was Professor of Greek mathematics and law, and dean of philosophy at Frankfurt. He wrote his book using old sources which he did not name. From the most trustworthy and the most ancient of the early writers. That's what he wrote, but he did not give the name. As a result of his diligent gathering of ancient materials, he made the following entry. In the year of the world 2453, as many trustworthy authors on the basis of many conjectures have determined, a comet appeared which Pliny also mentioned in his second book. It was fiery, of irregular circular form, with a wrapped head. It was in the shape of a globe and was of terrible aspect. It is said that King Typhon ruled at the time in Egypt. Certain authorities assert that the comet was seen in Syria, Babylonia, India, in the sign of Capricorn, in the form of a disk, at the time when the children of Israel advanced from Egypt toward the promised land, led on their way by the pillar of cloud during the day and by the pillar of fire at night. Rockenbach did not draw any conclusion on the relation of the comet of the days of Exodus to natural phenomena of the time. His intent was only to fix the date of the comet of Typhon. Among the early authors, Lydius Servius, who quotes Avienus, Hephaestion, and Junctions, in addition to Pliny, mention the Typhon comet. It is depicted as an immense globe, globus immodicus, of fire, also as a sickle, which is a description of a globe illuminated by the sun, and close enough to be observed. Thus, its movement was slow, its path was close to the sun, its color was bloody, it was not of fiery but of bloody redness. It caused destruction in rising and setting. Servius writes that this comet caused many plagues, evils, and hunger. To discover what were the manuscript sources of Abraham Rockenbach that led him to the same conclusion at which we have arrived, namely that the Typhon comet appeared in the time of Exodus, is a task not yet accomplished. Servius says that more information about the calamities caused by this comet is to be found in the writings of the Roman astrologer Campster and in the works of the Egyptian astrologer Petosiris. It is possible that copies of works of some authors containing citations from the writings of these ancient astrologers, preserved in the libraries of Europe, were Rockenbach's manuscript sources. Campester, as quoted by Lydius, was certain that, should the comet Typhon again meet the Earth, a fourth-day encounter would suffice to destroy the world. This implies also that the first encounter with the comet Typhon brought the Earth to the brink of destruction. मेरो वर्डै कस्तो कस्तो हुन थालिसक्यो अहिले, धेरै बोल्दै होला है। अब यसपछिको पार्ट चाहिँ अर्को भिडियोमा भन्छु है।